Hello, everyone, and welcome to another conversation, another session of the Ridiculously Good Reads Book Club, brought to you by First Presbyterian Church, Hastings, Nebraska. This is one of our open conversations on the book Lila by Marilynne Robinson. We've read other books in the Marilynne Robinson verse, the Gilead connected book universe. Including Gilead and Home, and now Lila, which, as you might imagine, is the story of Lila, if anyone is familiar with the characters. So we've got a few different folks joining in the conversation this evening. And once again, I don't really have a great way to start. Let's see, where am I in the book? I am in the book. Lila just had an encounter with a very young man who also came across the shack that she had been living in outside of Gilead. And that brought back with it a flood of memories, it seems. Or at least story. I don't know if these are really memories or not that Lila is experiencing. I think that maybe they are, but and then another conversation between Reverend Ames and Lila about whether or not she's going to leave. So yeah, that's kind of where I am. I don't know if there's any place anybody would want to start in particular. If folks have listened to some of the other conversations, if there's anything anybody would want to jump in with or follow up on from those sorts of things. So I guess the floor is open right now.
The story of the redheaded kid, I think, is fascinating as a metaphor for the feral children that roamed this part of the upper Midwest, during the Depression years and later. That young man was so cut off. When he refers to killing his father with a chunk of firewood, and he makes the comment, "It was just my paw," like it was just the dog, or that's a pretty stunning statement. You wonder, what else would have been more serious in his world. It was just my paw. I mean, like, what's the big deal?
Well, I think it was a very big deal to him, however. He kind of breaks down later in the conversation and would like to turn himself in and be executed or whatever, just because he doesn't want to have to live with this for the rest of his life. He doesn't want to face whatever there is to face in a life of running away, which kind of contrasts with Dahl having faced a life of running away for so many years.
Mm-hmm. And I think he's afraid of leaving home. It's like, I've never known anything else but home is awful, terrible.
Right.
Desperate. But where else could I go? And I almost wonder if he is looking to turn himself in and be, like you said, Constance, executed, because he can't envision where else to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was very surprised by this. I did not anticipate this coming in the novel. My sense, Denny, from his saying it was just my paw, was a soft way of kind of reassuring this stranger that he had met, that just meant that he wasn't a danger to her. And it also, his story also struck me as reminiscent of Cain's experience from the biblical narratives, right? Cain kills Abel, his brother, not his father. But then Cain is kicked out. Part of Cain's punishment for killing his brother is that he's forced to become a wanderer and wander around. And Cain doesn't like this idea, in part because he says anybody that comes across me is going to kill me, is what he says. Which is maybe also kind of reminiscent of Dahl's narrative as well. But
Can you remember, Damon, which book in the Hebrew Bible that Cain's and Abel stories in?
that's in Genesis.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Cain killed Abel. Yeah. Right there towards the beginning. Yeah. And God offers him some sort of protection. He was, well, no, he places a sign on Cain that gives him protection. So people know, oh, no, this is God's person. So we really shouldn't kill God's person. But
in some ways, that boy is very much like Lila too, kind of not being nurtured, not being raised in a hospitable environment. And then I'm on page 169. I underlined she wanted to tell Ames that she didn't know him because he's suspicious that she's meeting somebody, or somebody that she knew before is going to come and, seduce her away. At the top of 169, it seemed almost as if she had lied to the preacher when she said she didn't know that boy. He had been at the edge of her sight all those years, orphaned his whole life. Just that terrible little ember of pride, meanness, and kindness, all that he had to shelter it with. So I think she recognizes the orphaned part of him. This is somebody like me who needs somebody to come to their assistance.
I was I was struck too, Constance, by the compassion that Lila shows toward the young kid. Wanting to leave her coat when the weather outside was very inclement, and wanting to get him to the church to sleep on a pew, or maybe even to John Ames' house. But that was maybe a bridge too far, and he wouldn't go, on top of everything else. Again, trust no one.
Right.
Is such an embedded part of that conversation.
He trusts her, interestingly.
Yes.
But she doubts he would trust anyone else.
And the money.
Yeah.
Conversation over her money. And people living on the edge, I'm thinking, have a hard time seeing the utility of money beyond, buying snacks and items in the 5 and dime store at that time. Because she's willing to give him, part of the money, because I think she's initially afraid of him or what he might do to her if she said, "That's my money, thank you very much." But in the end, wants him to take it and buy a bus ticket and, go someplace where it's warm.
Yeah. I don't know how much he really trusts her and how much he's just needs somebody else to like help carry the burden of it. And his own loneliness. This is another person who seems terribly lonely in the course of the novel. It's interesting. Lila tells him essentially, like, you shouldn't trust me, and you should not be telling just any old random stranger that you come across about what happened. And another part of this interaction that I find fascinating is that Lila does for this kid a lot of the same things that Ames and the others in Gilead are doing for her, that she seems to so deeply resent or so deeply wants to resent.
Understand?
Yeah. I don't know, but she is on the receiving end of several acts of compassion. And then she treats this young man with several acts of compassion, even though she seems to not really like having received any of the acts of compassion. I don't really know what to do with that.
I'm thinking back to when Doll took her from the doorstep and she received lots of acts of compassion there. And yet, initially, when they try to bathe her or cut the knits out of her hair, she swears at them, tells them to go to hell and so forth. So, I mean, Doll had to go through that too, that mistrust for a bit. But, she did give her food and she covered her with the shawl. And in essence, Lila is doing the same with this boy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good point.
Yeah. And Lila is also pregnant at this time, and obviously so, right? I mean, the kid knows. Yeah. And so there's this, Lila's talking with this young man, and also thinking about her child, kind of, at the same time. That I think she maybe sees herself in this young man, sees her own child in this young man as well, which is interesting. Mom, Dad, I want to give you a chance to join in if you want, but I don't know if you're rereading along. I don't know.
I am rereading, but I am not nearly caught up to where you all are. So
Right, I'm not reading at all.
That's fine.
you read.
I'm trying to remember, which is not always the best place to be.
Yeah.
No, in your conversation, well, we listened to it this morning, and Lila she's sure of herself in lots of ways, lots of things that she does. Particularly when she said, "I think you ought to marry me." I mean, that was really a bold move for somebody that has been wandering around, not even sure where she'd sleep the next day, and then pronounce, "Well, I think you ought to marry me." That was a total leap for her. And here now she has this young lad who was in the same position Lila was not too long ago. And she's really trying to maybe urge him in the direction she went, be more, to a great extent, assertive, you could say. That's what I just find that interesting about old Lila. How she could be not so sure, and then all at once, let's get married. Out of
David,
character.
David, I see that will you marry me as a pure survival ploy.
No.
I mean, winter was coming on. The old man had a nice, comfortable house, and I'm not sure she was thinking much beyond that, because there's always these questions that keep popping up after, he says, "Well, I will marry you." Well, am I going to stay or not? I mean, it's just a continuous, thinking back, ooh, did I really make the right decision? But this house is awfully comfy, and I sure like getting hugged by him because he's warm and he's compassionate and he's gentle. And this is something I don't think she's ever seen in her, sort of short life. What's she, 33 or something like that, I think, when they're married, 34-ish.
I don't remember hearing an age.
Well, my cousin in California, speaking of California, picked up at my suggestion Lila for her book club, and she had read Gilead several years before, and she went back and reread Gilead, and that's where she found the age.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, it makes sense because she's moving into that age where she's not sure she'll be fertile.
Okay. If she's even aware of, a fertile age.
She seems to be, because she refers to it a couple different times.
Okay.
She's almost surprised when she's pregnant because she thought she was getting too old for that.
Yeah. Yeah. We also get in this portion of the book more details about the knife, which I want to come back to, and about Doll's death, and what led to Doll's death. The knife.
No, she killed.
Hmm?
Did she kill somebody? Doll?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. A man. We don't know who.
Although it
Most-
might be.
It might. Yeah, it might be Lila's father. It might be some really, it might be a cousin, a brother of Lila's father. It seems to have been someone who was searching Doll out specifically for something, and she kept that knife sharp all the time, for that particular reason. And yeah, then gets into a knife fight, and if I read it correctly, returns to Lila, finds Lila after Lila had been on her own for maybe about a month or something. Maybe Doll heard that this guy was getting close and wanted to go out on her own for a little bit. Lila didn't even know that they were in the same town. And then Doll shows up at her doorstep, bloodied and injured, and Lila washes the blood off of her.
Best she can.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A lot of blood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this knife keeps reminding me of the gun from Gilead, of John Ames's grandfather's gun and bloodied shirt. That was just kind of always sort of floating around somewhere, reminding the family of some past incident, whether it was sinful or not, who's to say. But
Good tie-in.
Yeah, but yeah, so I don't know what others are thinking about the knife or about Doll's, what we learn about Doll's death. She ends up in jail, and either they forget to lock the chain, or they choose not to and just let her go. But then she wanders off into the woods and disappears, which is interesting biblically, because there are some folks in the scriptural accounts whose death is not recorded. I think Methuselah is just taken up to live with the Lord. Ezekiel in the same way. It doesn't die. It's just taken up to live with the Lord.
Isn't Elijah also
Yeah, Elijah. Yeah, that's who I'm thinking of actually. Yep.
mantle to Elijah?
Yes. Yeah. When a mantle is kind of like a shawl that you might pass along to someone if you still had it.
Yeah, if it hadn't been burned in the fire.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We find out in this section when Doll comes back that she has previously used her knife to lame one of that clan. So there's another man who has been lamed. And so I can't say when that happens, whether they start after her because of Lila, or she lames the man because he's after her. But it ultimately culminates in her killing this man and his nearly killing her, and maybe essentially killing her.
Mm-hmm.
Constance,
Yes.
right at that point where Doll is bloodied,
Mm-hmm.
all of the blood on Lila was that blood that came off from Doll, it rubbed off from Doll when
It's blood from both of them, I think.
was Lila hurt or injured?
No,
or-
no, no. Lila's not hurt, but the man that she killed and her own blood seem to be conjoined.
Okay. And I think that goes back maybe to a piece of scripture in Ezekiel, because she is so fascinated with Ezekiel,
Right.
throwing the baby and the baby's blood,
Mm-hmm.
story that keeps coming kind of
Sure.
back and emerging and in her mind. She has a very, very busy mind. There are a lot,
Yes.
but she's trying to process
Right.
so much. I really see Lila in many ways as a novel about discovery of what it is like to discover an entirely new world that you cannot imagine, prior to landing on the church steps and coming in out of the rain. And in African fables, coming in out of the rain is, a very, very poignant theme that, I have seen, having lived there and read so much of African literature. It's really, really kind of neat. It's kind of coming in from like the spider came in from the cold. It's like coming in from the wilderness, to a safe haven.
Well, she is coming in from the wilderness, isn't she?
Yes. Yeah.
She's a very primitive being.
Oh, yes. And I'm reminded of that Lila is kind of a metaphor, maybe misusing that term, for the difficulty that some people in that situation have with connecting with other human beings. And I'm remembering some of the psychological studies that Harry Harlow, I think at the University of Wisconsin, did back in the 1950s, talking about going back to the dark ages, with monkeys from the same litter who were separated at birth,
Mhm.
how they could not bond, after they were reunited.
Hmm.
And, I kind of thought about that whole difficulty of reattaching. And I think we've all read about children, in foster care or whatever, that have a very, very difficult time
Yeah.
reattaching.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, the way that Lila was brought up was to keep everything at a distance.
For safety.
Yeah, because that was safer for them, don't trust anybody, which she essentially tells the young man that she finds. She's taken the money that she gathered up.
And again, Damon,
Yeah.
that theme of don't trust no one, which appears with amazing regularity in the novel, it seems to me is such a cautionary tale for where we are today, for so many Americans, as we're heading into an election in which there are things happening at poll watchers and so-called that we never ever thought we would see in this country. Trust no one. I mean, it's really, really a sad statement.
Yeah. And in some ways, Lila doesn't seem to know if she herself is trustworthy, right? She tells Ames, like, you really shouldn't trust me. You don't know me, she says. I was glad, Constance, that you quoted that little bit where it was it was as though she knew the young man, right? Because somewhere also in there, Ames says something to the effect of, there are people that you meet and it feels as though you've always known them. And then there are people that you meet and you will never know. I think he says something like that.
He also, and I don't know, it must be within this section, remembers when she walked into the church and he said, I saw your face. I knew you.
Yeah.
And then that will come up again later when maybe it is in this section when she tells him why she took pity on this boy. And he says, I knew that I knew you.
Mm-hmm.
Almost as if she's embodying Jesus in that moment, and he knows Jesus. Am I skipping it?
No, I don't think so. But
Okay.
no, I hadn't made that connection of her acts of mercy and kindness mirroring the acts of Jesus. Yeah. And Ames, knowing that.
Yeah.
It's we also get a little bit of more information perhaps on the death of Ames' wife and his first wife and child, and Boughton being there with her because Ames was
out of
else.
town doing something for the church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that it was just Boughton, and that there must be a picture of Jesus somewhere on the wall in the living room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Jesus keeping silent and Boughton struggling to find the words to say, to offer in prayer. But yeah.
Is that at Lila's birthing of her child? Because that, I
Mhm.
believe, comes up again.
It might. I'm not there. I'm not there yet.
Okay.
But if it happens at home, then it would make sense for that to be the case
Mhm.
again.
She says something about Bowden and Jesus. Maybe I'm confusing two scenes.
I mean, we certainly see things kind of happening again and again,
Mhm. Yeah.
just with kind of with different names, and slightly different circumstances.
Mhm.
It would seem so.
On page 110, I think one of the things, there's a section in there, in and around page 110, where I think she's pulling this from the Hebrew Bible, and she is talking about words that are so terrible that there is no language and there are no words. Because when you experience them, and she's really doesn't know it, but she's articulating nonverbal, kind of nonverbal words that are so powerful, whether it's witnessing death or a terrible storm coming. I'm thinking of Hurricane Ivan or Ian. I thought that was, so moving and so powerful. A lot of times we don't stop to think about that. We think of, we have to be saying words all the time to witness words.
Yeah, there's a lot here about unspoken communication particularly between people who know each other in this sort of sense. I think part of this comes from that Ezekiel passage that the creatures they speak, but they have they speak, but they have no voice.
Yeah.
Right. That people, you're able to hear them, but their voice has no sound or something like that. And there's a scene, Bowden and Ames and Lila, they get in the DeSoto and go back to the shack to take some things to leave for the young man. And then on the way back, they don't say, it's just silence on the way back, except that Lila knows that Bowden and Ames are having an entire conversation.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And she wants it out.
Yeah.
He said, she said, I mean, he said.
Yep.
She worth all this trouble.
Yeah. And in the same way, there's some unspoken understanding between Lila and this young man, that and there's unspoken communication between that portrait of Jesus and Bowden, and this sort of thing. So,
And she's discovering within that same same context, she's discovering love and joy and laughter that's not cynical, not threatening laughter, that is genuine from the heart, that's comforting. This is that part of that discovery, I think, that is so important, that it's like, this is a whole new world. And any of us that have traveled, outside tourist, the tourist zones, have had those eureka moments that, whoa, this is really cool. I hadn't thought about that before.
Yeah, I don't know. Traveling, I think, is one way to come across that, and then I think that there's all sorts of other ways,
Oh, yeah.
to come across it, coming across a new philosophy or a new, a new author or a new, whatever the case might be, a new stage of life, maybe even, but yeah, certainly. I was thinking about communication and things that remain unspoken, and then contrasting it with things that get spoken between the characters. Lila continues to just kind of blurt things out, even though she can't hardly believe that she's saying stuff. But I'm thinking in particular, Doll has killed a guy. The sheriff comes the next morning, or maybe sometime shortly thereafter. They put her on the stretcher. They take her to jail.
He picks her up because she doesn't weigh more than a cat.
We can't get a stretcher there. I mean, it's just taking forever. So yeah, the sheriff picks her up, right? Constantly.
Yeah. They take her to jail. When it's nice out, they set up a rocking chair outside and let her sit on it, and people can come by and look at her. So she's an object of some sort of fascination, I guess, for people in the area. Which I don't know if it's an act of kindness or if it's an act of cruelty, but and Lila comes, and does Doll say I don't know you? Is that what she says to her?
Yes.
She
Okay.
does. Lila comes up and gives her a molasses cookie, and Doll doesn't even pick it up because she doesn't want anybody to know that Lila's associated with her, because she fears the vengeance of this group that's gathered round. Because they're kin to the dead man.
Yeah. Okay. So you think that that's what that's about?
Yeah. She's
Okay.
protecting her.
Yeah.
But it seems, yeah, go ahead, Constance.
Oh, what were you thinking about that? Because it's very hurtful to Lila at first when she doesn't have the reason.
Yeah, at least up to this point, it seems like that is sort of has haunted her for a year. Like, why would she say that? Why would she say that she doesn't know me? And of course, Lila has told the same thing to the police.
I've never seen this woman before. She just came here.
Yeah. So I suppose they're kind of saying one thing but meaning the other.
Well, surely Doll would want to protect her from the wrath of this clan that is out to get some kind of vengeance.
But it has to be very difficult for Lila, because that's about her only lifeline that she's had throughout her whole maturation and growing up, is Doll. And I mean, this is like tearing away my only anchor.
Yeah, especially when Doll leaves. And an interesting connection here. I don't know if I'm getting ahead of where we are, but she goes to find a dress for herself because she's torn up her spare dress to bind Doll's wounds. So she has to go buy a dress at the thrift store, and the woman sees the blood on her and assumes that she's either just had a baby or she's aborted a baby, and gives her the address for a place where they take care of girls like you, which is a brothel.
Hmm. Okay.
Turns out to be a brothel.
Well, I think Lila knows it's going to be a brothel.
Okay. I thought she might think it was an orphanage because I think she was petrified that she might be hauled away to an orphanage, maybe.
I don't think she's the age that she could be taken as an orphan anymore.
I think you're right, but that may be still wedged in her mind. I'm just speculating. Don't know.
No, I think it's an act of immolation that she goes there.
Okay.
Interesting. Yeah, this was a portion, yeah, of the novel that I was not really expecting, I suppose. I was not expecting an encounter with a young lad at the shack, and it was very, very interesting portion of it, I thought. So
Yeah. Well, I like seeing that the trust is growing between Lila and Ames. And I think they're growing to appreciate one another more and more.
mhm. Yeah, we get a little bit more depiction of kind of their home life,
Mm-hmm.
and that she waves to him every day as he leaves. And he waves back, and he comes
Tilts his hat.
home. Yes, that's what it is. Yes, thank you. And comes back every day at lunch, and they have a hug in the doorway. Yeah.
And then she goes out to meet him at the church, I think, when it's time for him to come home.
Yeah. So then, yeah, there's something that was the day she decided she'd never let him walk alone again, or something like this.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things,
Yeah.
that, you know, I guess in 2022, it really is amusing, particularly at my age, that Lila considers him over and over and over again the old man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, he may not even be here next year, so I don't want to plan too far ahead and buy green bananas.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, really?
Yeah, she's hyper realistic in that way. And Ames is also, like, Ames also will say, like, no, like, I might not be here next year. And he also, like, in relation to he and Lila's child, he catches himself at least once or maybe twice saying, like, no, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I shouldn't hope or like anticipate essentially joy. It seems too much. So they're similar, actually, in that way of having experienced some sort of wound and not wanting to eagerly anticipate things too much.
I think he's terribly afraid that she's going to die in childbirth, and the child will too. You know, this has certainly happened to him before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In Lila's sort of gypsy tribe, the life expectancy of men may have been brutal and short. You know, to paraphrase, you know, Machiavelli, short, brutish, and whatever, in the state of nature.
Excuse me, I'm going to shut the door. Go ahead.
Okay.
So her image of, you know, what constitutes an old man, may be shaped by that experience out in the subsistence world.
Mhm. Yeah, well, she remembers having a friend once, or somebody told her once, that once they get to a certain age, men are harder to keep around than, I forget than what. They just up and die all the time is essentially what
Mhm.
her friend told her.
David, is that true?
Eventually they do die.
Uh, uh,
You were talking about when they say, I don't know her, I don't know who that is. And then you think back to Peter, because Peter denied knowing Jesus 3 times, even though everybody had seen him wandering around with Jesus. It was that safety, that separation, that, no, I don't know, and you can't kill me because you're gonna.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it was a survival instinct. No, I don't know. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I hadn't made that connection. Yeah, either between those things. It also makes me think of, I don't know, well, there's I'm thinking when Jesus is baptized, there's a voice that comes from heaven, and sometimes Jesus hears it and sometimes everybody else hears it, depending on which gospel you're reading. But this is my son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased. But there's a sense of knowing in that as well. Yeah, to know someone.
Another take on the primordial world that Lila came from. She, like Native Americans and hunters and gatherers everywhere, has no sense of clock time. Everything is observed, changes. Sun, setting, sun coming up, high noon, winter, the seasons. But what time is it? What day is it? Don't know.
Mhm.
It's irrelevant. I mean, it's never been part of my world, so why are you bothering me with that information?
Yeah, she says a couple of times that she keeps forgetting to pay attention to track the days of the week.
Yes,
Mhm.
but how similar that is to hunters and gatherers all over the world who did not have, a quartz watch or a smartphone,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and for whom it really didn't matter.
Yeah, and the 24-hour days and the 7 days a week, their understanding provides a certain sense of consistency, reliability, like this, persistence, perhaps, in a way that doesn't necessarily fit with Lila, kind of having always been on the move from one thing to the next. And yeah. Well, Mom, were you gonna say something a little bit ago?
Well, I was just thinking when I, think about the bands of people, Doan's bands of people, and there were other bands of people in it, and I'm trying to get the years in my head for when this occurred, but it reminds me of the number of hobos who traveled, and they weren't bums, they weren't, they were hobos, and they traveled from place to place for work. And there were a lot of hobos in Iowa. I mean, they still have a hobo festival up at Britt, Iowa, but they had a whole vocabulary, a whole way of communicating and leaving information for people who came and went with them and before them and followed them. And there were all kinds of symbols that marked where was a good place, where the water was good, where the water was bad, where you could go in a town for medical care and not have to pay. And I'm just, you know, that they marked places where it was safe to camp, and I'm just trying to figure out in my mind if Doan's people kind of fit in that mold.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think so.
Yeah, I think they definitely do. There's a couple of references in the novel to when the dust really started to blow. So I mean, this
Yeah.
seems to be Dust Bowl era, and so you've got Depression, Dust Bowl, and you've got even more folks out wandering. You have folks exodus from
Yeah,
Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas, yeah, to other places. And when she comes across this young man at the shack, he has clearly not bathed in quite some time. And she remembers, this is exactly who Doan didn't want us to be.
Yeah.
We're gonna go around and we're gonna be presentable. We're gonna,
yes.
you
They mended their clothing when they were able to, and they bathed when they could, and they made themselves as presentable as possible, even if they were just walking right straight through a community, a town.
And I think I remember Doan being, angry or miffed at some of the folks that Damon mentioned coming up from Oklahoma that were willing to work for virtually nothing and causing them no end of grief in terms of being able to find work because, they expected to be paid something, in potatoes or apples or whatever the coin of the realm was that day, and forcing them to have to keep on moving east, or I think it was east, or to Missouri or wherever.
Well, that whole lifestyle becomes untenable once the Dust Bowl and the Depression occur. They have to give it up, and Doan loses his pride, and their whole band splits up.
Right.
Yeah.
The only thing in my mind that doesn't fit with that lifestyle is that Lila keeps remembering how Doan was so sure that churches were bad, that, and it seems
Just want your money.
yes, and it seems to me that hobos usually knew where the churches and where the preachers lived, and that, there were marks on the fences, and so it doesn't really fit that Doan would steer them completely away from any churches. He must have had a really bad experience.
Or,
Yeah.
or they're thinking about the camp meetings down in the river, with the slick,
Oh,
the slick ministers
yep.
coming in to save everybody at a price.
Mhm.
And John Ames simply doesn't fit that mold. He's been there. He is not leaving. He's not going anywhere. His father preceded him. His grandfather preceded him.
Mhm.
So just two different types of images of the pastoral staff, pastoral people.
Sure.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, one suspects that, at least I suspect, Doan had some sort of experience that led him to think that way. So we are about at the time where we might want to start wrapping up. Is there anything that anybody really wanted to make sure that we talked about or got mentioned before we wrap things up?
Is the next session pretty much going to wrap it up?
We've got one more of the Constance, Jenny, and I recorded ones, and then one more public
And so
session.
right now we're all on about page 160-ish.
I think I'm at 175.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, well, there's one more thing I want to mention then real quick. On 142, Ames pretty much assures Lila that the Lord is gracious and Doll and the rest of them are safe. He doesn't say
Yeah.
safe, he says safe.
Yeah, and in a warm place. I seem to recall him saying. Mhm.
Yeah, which is nice.
Yeah, warm as in comfortable, not warm as in fires of hell.
Mhm.
I
Right.
guess I should be more specific. Yes.
Safe, warm, and happy, and a little bit surprised.
Mhm.
And Karen and David, it's good to see you.
Oh, it's good to see
Well,
you all.
yeah. We,
Yes, glad to have you back.
we quite often have conflicts on Thursday night, so we could jump in tonight and, I don't know, 2 weeks from now I have a meeting, but I'll try to get the book reread, finished by then. I
There you go.
really do like these books and yeah. But it's fun to reread it.
Yeah, so okie dokie. Well, my thanks for everyone for joining in conversation this evening. My thanks to those who may be watching or listening at some point later on. My thanks to Marilynne Robinson for writing these books, crafting these characters, giving us so much to ponder and to consider. So thank you to all my conversation partners this evening. And until next time, toodaloo.
Adios.
Thank you.